Welcome to Self-Taught, where former foster youth, like myself, share our real-life experiences with sex, health, and life. Hosted by the Reproductive Health Equity Project, these are some conversations we wish we'd had earlier. Hey guys, heads up, this episode is on consent, which is going to be triggering for some people, so use your own discretion when watching that and check out our resources. We put them there for you. They're in the show notes. I'm really excited that you are joining us, and I'm excited about what you're talking about. From what interactions we have had, I have an immense amount of respect for you, and so I'm really excited that you are the one that is going to kind of help us tackle this idea of consent, and hopefully we can shed some light on it, and of course how it ties into the experience of foster care, or really any kind of challenging childhood experiences. I think it's pretty relatable. So what is consent? What is it not? What does that look like?
Yeah. So for me, consent looks like this. Consent is a place where people are empowered to say yes, to say no, to have the authority to have their bodily autonomy and what and who they want to share that with, and understanding that consent isn't just about sexual activity either. It's about emotions and finances and relationships and understanding emotional boundaries within people in your life. And consent isn't taking advantage of other people, and it's understanding that you also might not be asking for consent from someone else, and it might be in a less obvious way. You might think that you're very respectful of others, but it's good to self-acknowledge where you've gone wrong to try to be a better person every day.
Yeah, I think what you just hit on, well, so many things, but what you just hit on about, if you need to acknowledge that in yourself, that maybe I didn't ask for consent, that's so challenging. And I think one of the things about this topic is it's not always black and white, even though it's this really heated topic and we want it to be super simple. It's not always, sometimes there are things that aren't, they're neither here nor there. That's just inappropriate or disrespectful, but it's not necessarily the maliciousness of, predators. So, yeah, I'm excited to hear more about what your thoughts are on that. And would you want to share a little bit more about what's made you feel moved to speak on this subject? I don't think this is your first time talking about it either. So this is
for me, consent is something I'm really passionate about because it has to do with every aspect of human development. Consent is an ongoing thing and it looks different for everyone. It's not going to look the same on every level. I think it's important to not always attack people who don't understand consent because maybe it was never taught to them, which is why we're here today talking about it, to help teach people and inspire them to self-think about what consent for them looks like too. And understanding that you need to love everyone in a way of a level of just being human, and that they also are having their own human experience, and understanding that communication is what's going to draw those lines of consent with you and another person, and having a mutual respect and be willing to learn as well as be willing to teach, and understanding that life is going to constantly be changing. And 5 years ago, 5 days ago, it looked different than it does for you today. I feel like it's important to, as you grow as a human, to shed layers of your past and continue evolving into a new person that is willing to learn more about yourself and learn more about others and the people in your life.
And what was learning it like for you? Was this it probably doesn't all happen bam right at once, but are there any keystone moments that were big for you on this kind of journey?
For me, consent was never respected in my childhood. Being in foster care and just a broken home in general, it wasn't thought about. I was also raised from parents that are a lot older. They had me in their 40s. So it was around a 20-ish year, give or take, age difference from, I guess, the average age of when people have kids. So there is not only this barrier between my trauma and how I was raised, there was also this age barrier. So my parents grew up in a time where mental health wasn't talked about. Women's rights were still erupting. It's crazy. My dad was alive during the Vietnam War. And when I think about that stuff, it's, a lot of my friends' parents, they didn't grow up in that time. And a lot of the times they would be shocked at some things my parents would say, or even now. And looking back as an adult, I realized they didn't know any better because no one talked about it. They didn't talk about it in schools. They didn't talk about it at home. And plus all the trauma I went through, and then being taken from my family and then being placed in another home and then going back with my dad and not knowing my mom. It was just this constant change, and it was never stable for me. And I truly believe that I thought that I knew everything. I thought that I was just so broken, and that I had figured out life, and that people were evil, and that life was horrible, and I didn't understand the point of all the pain. And because of that, it led me to making a lot of not well-informed decisions, and people taking advantage of me, because people, like you say, hurt people. And on top of that, predators like to go for people who are disadvantaged. And predator isn't always the creepy man at the corner. It's sometimes your friends. It's sometimes your relationship, who you're dating. Sometimes it's your parents. It can be on all sorts of levels. And I think this lack of healing from my trauma really prevented me from learning more about what consent looked like for me until honestly about a year or two ago.
What kind of memories are popping up for you on that?
Well, they say there's certain like core moments in your life. Like this church thing was a core moment for me. My mentor, I call her my mentor. She was very religious, and like I believe in a higher being, I believe in it, God, but I don't believe in like strict religion. That's just not who I am. I think that men have changed it over time, which is why we have so many problems today. And that's why it's kind of hard for me, to like sometimes vibe with people who are super religious. And it's not that I think they're stupid. It's just that I disagree. And so she was always pushing for me to go to church, always like pushing for this. And I was like, okay, fine. And she's like, here, we'll settle. And she told me that she's like, go to this like group meeting every Tuesday. So me and my best friend, she's like, you guys can go together. So basically, she and I did not know what this would be. And we go to this meeting, and it's a bunch of like 40 to 65-year-olds. And then there's me and her, and we are like, 17? We go in the first day, it's like they start talking about rape and really heavy topics. And we both look at each other like, okay, what did she do? Like her aunt, like what did she send us to? Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I've told her I'd try this, and I was like, I'll try to take it seriously, like maybe I'm here for a reason, I guess, and I'll try to see this through. I'm the type of person, I like to tell people, you pick your heart, like for me, when I had my kiddo, it was never, people always ask me, this is like a personal thing. They always say like, did you ever want to have an abortion, or did you want to give him up for adoption, or why, how did you want to keep him? And I honestly, my answer is I just picked my heart. Everything in life is hard, and everything's going to have challenges. So I picked my heart for me, like what I wanted to go through. So for this, I realized I'm going to pick my heart with this, and I'm going to just dive into it. And I had never even thought about these traumas that I had. And for me, I knew it would be hard, but I would rather go through that instance than live a life full of suppression. So even though I wasn't super religious and I didn't, read their Bible scriptures, they would have us in our weekly assignments. They helped me understand all these moments that I was taken advantage of in so many different ways. And I realized I had been sexually assaulted a lot more times than I realized. And, obviously there's the times where, it was a no, and I knew those, and those lived with me and still do. But then there were the times where it was on the red line. You didn't really know if it was a no, and you kind of blame yourself and think, well, maybe it was my fault, that it happened. Maybe I wasn't vocal enough, and because of that, it was actually the one good thing about this cult class I took was that they actually did have some education in psychology, like the instructor, so it wasn't like they actually knew what they were talking about and how to talk about it. So because of that and the tasks and assignments, it was a self-growth class, to really take these situations and to heal from them, and to not have this blame, this like victim and imposter syndrome that you kind of have. And I remember she wanted us to write down every person that we knew that it was just should have not happened. And then we had to write down the next week all the times that it was, the maybes. and then write down all the times that it was I was comfortable with this, right? And I knew that it was bad when I had more no's than I did yeses. And because of that, it was just really hard. It was really hard for me to see that on paper. And I actually kept that paper to this day, just as a reminder of what I need to do for myself so that it never happens again. And obviously you can't always control that, but I think that controlling my healing, that is something I can control. And if I'm a healed person and trying to heal every day, no one's going to be able to take advantage of me like that again. And that is the one good thing that I took out of that crazy class that she had us go to in high school. But it was definitely hard for me, like going to that at night and then the next day going to high school,
Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that story. Because that's new for me too. And best believe I'm gonna give that a try later. Luckily I don't have to go to high school tomorrow. It's hard to like unpack all of that and then like, okay, go back to your regular day-to-day life. And you're like, okay, sure, we could do that. Wow.
When I was a young girl, I remember just wanting to know why. I was like, I want to know why about everything. And I thought I wanted to be a psychiatrist when I was like 12. And little did I know, a psychiatrist isn't even the one that talks to people. That's a psychologist. But I didn't know that at 12. I just thought it was all about the same. And I really held firmly to that. And I would put myself in these horrible situations. And I realized it was because I wanted to learn more about my own pain, and I was trying to do that from other people. And I think all that bitterness, it just creates an unhealthy environment for yourself eventually. And psychologically, you need to get through that unless you're going to be that person you see at 50 that's still holding on to that anger. And I didn't want that for myself. And being a mom, that reflected on my parenting. And, you have to move on at some point. And luckily, my son is the reason why I chose to. It wasn't easy after I had him, and I was young and I would blame myself a lot. And when people say, and it was always this, oh, I'm too young to have my son here. But then I thought my parents were old and they failed, and then I realized that doesn't matter. And I needed to work on myself. And I was in a really unhealthy relationship when a couple years ago, I was a senior in high school. I'm still so young. It's like weird, but it was very toxic. And he was actually really abusive and I didn't see it. And I guess, defining moment for me to where I like cut it off was he hit his mother in front of me. And I remember seeing that. And I remember thinking like, okay. And I was like, something needs to change here. And after that, I stopped putting up with people's, I guess, lack of respect for me and lack of respect for the planet and for society. And I started to question, instead of why are people so evil in the sense, I started to question like, why is our world the way it is? And in my studies, I actually ended up getting 4 associates from my community college, and 2 of them minus 1 class, but I still say I got it because I did everything minus like a math class, so that doesn't count. But I just studied a lot in politics and psych and sociology and just all these courses that really delved into society. And with my healthy relationship that I've been in the past couple of years and seeing what it looks like to be loved and respected, what it looks like to be in a relationship where you're growing, where you're trying to change your own life, you're trying to change the world in the sense, and you have that together. I realized how important it is for other people to hear that too, and for other people to hear my story. And even though it's hard to talk about sometimes and to think about, I'm going to disappoint myself. And I like to say right now, I'm still obviously in this healing phase, and healing takes time. It's not going to be done overnight or in a week or in 6 months. For me, it's like continuous, and some weeks are harder than others. Some months are harder than others. And then sometimes it's okay. And I realized it's okay to understand disappointment. It's okay to be disappointed in yourself, to be disappointed in life, and to want to make a difference, because that is what's going to change issues in our world. That's going to change how people respect each other, and that's going to change consent on so many levels.
Yeah, I think we sort of glossed over, you mentioned that you're in this really good relationship now. How does that contrast to before, like being taken advantage of and stuff, and how how do you recognize it, and how did you get there, and why is it better?
This sounds so cheesy, but and this is horror. I mean, this is bad, but I honestly didn't even care at the time. But I met him kind of while I was still with that really bad guy that I was dating. Sort of. It was like, in that middle ground where you're like a situationship, but you're still officially broken up. But you're still kind of tabling in, and texting them and stuff.
Yeah.
I had met him because of an unhealthy friend that I had, and that was respect on friend boundaries. I could go on hours about that, but she was, it gives me shudders thinking about it. But with him, I met him and he actually lied about who he was. He's like into like theater and acting and stuff. He's like total nerd, and he pretended he was like Australian and like all this stuff. And I thought he was so funny. Like he just struck me away. And I used to think when I was younger, like people were so mean to me and they bullied me so hard, and on issues just for my race too. When I was younger, I was really hairy. I'm Native American and Persian half, and I looked different when I was a kid. Like I looked like I was an immigrant, and people were mean. And I went to a private school, and I didn't realize a lot of the things they said were really racist at the time. And I had all this like anger towards people in my younger years, and I thought I was all cool then. I wanted to be hot stuff. And then when I hit puberty, I became, I guess, hot stuff. So then I was so mean to other people. And from that, I realized I lost who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. My interests changed, trying to fit in with this ideal standard of what a woman should be and what someone trying to be popular should be, and someone trying to run from their past and hide that they had a broken home and were in foster care and had these bad experiences with men. And when I met my boyfriend, he brought out my total nerd side, and I felt at home from the minute that I met him. I really did. And I like looked at him and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm like, I want to be with, like, literally it was so weird. It was the same night that he met me. He was joking, obviously, but he invited me all in one night to a formal at his college, to go visit his friend in Arizona, and to a concert, because he just wanted to plan everything with me, and he didn't even know me. And I remember laughing like, oh yeah, like, like, sure, like I'm not going to meet you again. And we have seen each other every single weekend since that day, almost 3 years ago. And he is an amazing role model for my son and for myself. And just seeing ways in which I could have had different relationships, maybe, from my past. And I think that it's not all drama with him, like it doesn't have to be this whole depressing thing. And with all these guys that I would date, they like wanted to fix me, and like, I wanted to fix them, and it was so toxic. And he doesn't want that, like if I want to talk about it, cool. He's not going to make me talk about it. He's not going to bring it up. He doesn't look at me like I'm broken. He looks at me like I'm growing. And because of that is why I love him so much. And I've really found who I was again, like all my old video games got pulled out, and all these books and all these things I used to love, that I just threw aside for so many years. And because of that, I'm seeing these qualities of when I was little in my little boy. And it's really amazing. And it's all because of who I'm with. And it's not like, oh, I'm putting all this stuff into a relationship, into this guy. It's not, it's that it's easy with him. Like it takes work, obviously, because we've been together for so long, but we have this like connection, and it doesn't feel like butterflies, and it doesn't feel like it's so hard every day. It just feels natural. Like I've known him my whole life.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And you're like all giddy when you're saying it too. I'm sure you probably already know, but it's adorable. I love it. I know you said you're not done healing. I don't know if anyone ever will be, but seriously, like props to you. You sound like you're darn close. I wouldn't have put it like that. I feel like you're very advanced. Would you be open to talking a little bit about like what makes it difficult on your side, or at least past you, like difficult to ask for or really demand consent and respect for you, given, background and all that good stuff? Not to like, not to say that you should have to demand it or ask for it. It should be a given, of course, but
Yeah, I feel like I've made a lot of mistakes. I've hurt so many people myself, and there's a lot of things I've done that I am not proud of. Even to my child's father, we're luckily okay now. It's in this weird standstill, but there's things I said to him, someone who is so close to my life, but then so distant. And those words hurt and they still, left an impact. And I think about all the other people, that I've hurt that are not lesser in my life, but, aren't in my life anymore. And I think about and I reflect on all the things that I could have done different. And then all the people that wronged me. And I realize it's just this horrible cycle, and it's not going to change unless you make that difficult change. And for me, like, it's definitely hard because wanting respect from people isn't, it should be, given, like consent should be an automatic thing, but it's not. And you have to earn this trust with someone. And I think that people get confused earning trust with consent, and respect. Like they're all just so similar and they're totally different. And we forget that it's all one and the same at the end of the day. And I think for me, it's hard, especially when it comes to healing in my own relationship and moving forward, because you have all these past barriers you're trying to work forward, from. And that includes like cutting people off sometimes and understanding that growth is okay and that you don't need, like, people are in your life for a reason and people come and go. And once you come to terms with that, I think it's a lot easier. And, it's okay. I've had people that really stood by me in hard moments in my life. And now we don't speak, but there's no hatred. There's only love there. And I think that that's because of this respect we had for each other. That's because of this, consent. And then there's other people that they're not in your life and it's negative, and it's because they didn't respect that consent. Understanding that at the end of the day, you have to put you first. And if someone's not willing to work with you on what you want to be treated like, then you have to move on at some point.
Yeah, it's reminding me of something I read somewhere about, like, the only people that are going to have a problem with you setting boundaries are the people that benefit when they get to break or whatever those boundaries. And yeah, if that means that person's not in your life anymore, it's might be tough, but it's probably going to be worth it in the end. You were saying that there's some people in your life that aren't in your life anymore, but there's only love there. There's nothing negative. It's just sort of sounds like maybe just sort of a natural growing apart kind of a thing. Could you expand on that? Are you open to that?
Yeah. So one of my, I guess, biggest mentors that I had in my life that really taught me about self-love was my best friend's aunt. And that's kind of a mouthful. It was always hard explaining who she was, to people. But for me, she wasn't like a mother figure. She was like a friend, but also like a role model and a mentor for me. And she had so many positive impacts in my life. She helped me so much with the pregnancy and then afterwards. And I always thought she was, I don't know, like she would be there forever, like how she was then. And at sometimes I was even closer to her than my best friend. And I've known my best friend since I was 5, and I've known her aunt respectively, the same time. And for me, like, it's crazy to think that I don't really talk to either of them that much anymore. And it's not that, there's any negativity. It's kind of not even growing out of it, but just like life moves on and people's passions change. And I think that her goal for me was to get to this place of self-healing where I'm at today. And she helped me make it here. And she has her own family and she gave up so much, to help me get to this place. And she has 3 kids. So it's kind of like, like she gave up a lot of herself and her relationship with her husband and her children to be there for me and my baby. And I think that is really how I want to treat other people going forward. And having that person that was like my role model with how people should be treating me in relationships and watching her healthy relationship, it shaped the way that I view my own self-love because of her. And I think it's okay to have differences with people. And we do have a lot of differences, I care about different issues and she does. We have different politics, whatever, but it doesn't matter because we both loved each other and we both had such a good impact in each other's life. And I want to carry that on to someone else one day.
That's very inspiring. I think like we were talking before this about how divided our world is. I think it's like sort of frowned upon to be friends with people that you have different belief systems. So I think that's really great. Could you speak to like what made her a role model for you? For me, I've had a lot of, I call them like extra moms and dads and extra grandmas. And I've gotten older and realized a difference between somebody who is an older friend who's a lot of fun and been a great support to me, but maybe isn't the super responsible role model mom, if that makes sense. So what is that? Does that vibe with you? Is that applicable to your best friend aunt or your extra aunt is what it sounds like? What made her a safe adult, I guess?
It's definitely very hard going from safe adults to non-safe adults. A couple of adults in my life, some of my friends' step parents would buy us alcohol, when we were in like 8th grade. And I remember thinking, oh, that's cool, but it's not. And in high school, the moms that would lie to your parents to let you go out, like it ranges. And she was the one adult in my life because I would tell her everything. Like there was like, I didn't care. Like I was telling her everything. And she would call me out, and tell me who was an unsafe adult. And I would be like, no, like, because I was like, what, 15, 16, and even younger than that. And I think that that's what built this relationship of trust. She never went around telling my parents, but she wasn't unsafe, but she knew that if she wanted to get through to me, she's going to have to earn my trust by consenting to me telling her personal things about my life, And I remember when I got pregnant, before that, I'm not a super religious person or anything, but she ran the youth group at like her dad's church. And she really bonded with me. I'd go because my best friend was there and we could hang out, but she really created this relationship with me and she put so much effort into it, and she just so happened to live right down the street from me. And then we just moved there like a year prior, and then I got pregnant, and it was just such a coincidence, but not, and having that support and having that person that I could trust that was telling me she'd be there for me, even though, she was a lot older than me and I didn't know what that would look like. She really put like this idea that I can do it, and because of her, I can thank her for everything. And it doesn't matter what differences, we had and we'd banter about, but she was a safe person for me to go to. And she always will be, and she used to get so mad when I'd be around those unsafe adults like that you mentioned. And I remember a lot of those in my life.
Yeah. Did she ever, what it sounds like to me is that she was very honest with you, like didn't hold back, and that made her trustworthy because you're going to really tell me how it is. But at the same time, did she intervene? It sounds like she was like, you're going to do what you're going to do, but I'm not going to enable, or what was that like? Did she ever step in and put her foot down and be like, I'm not going to let you go over there or something like that?
No, because I was a mom. I had my son when I was 15, and you have to respect another adult at that point. And she helped me feel like an adult, and she helped me become an adult. And I hate to say it, but I wasn't when I had my son, and I still feel like I'm not. But then I look at all the adults in my life that are in their 60s and I'm like, oh, neither are you. So I think it's a constant learning process for everybody. But she really would, call me out on things, if I needed to do better or something. But there wasn't nothing she could do, because at that point, once you have another life, there's a barrier you can't cross, at that point. But she would help guide me about what role model I wanted to be for my kiddo. And that is how she got through to me, like just by implementing this fact of, well, how do you want to seem, like, how do you want to be for him? And just helping me get there, helping me stay in school, and being that person I could cry to, if I was struggling with things, and telling me I shouldn't text that guy, because they're unhealthy, but still understanding that I was young and not forcing me into this whole, now you're a mom, you have to do this and this, like I did get experience a lot of my youth still, and I respect her for that. And her still being like, yeah, you're a mom and you are young and you should have both, but you need to understand the barrier between those two. And guiding me through that and showing me what that looked like. And I think without her, I would have been lost. So I can respect her and appreciate her for not only making me a better person, but making me a better mom.
And when you were 15 and she's telling you that's not a safe adult, that's an adult friend over there, how did 15, I mean, it sounds like now we could be like, yeah, of course, but was 15-year-old you on board with that? It sounds like you definitely listened because you're like, I have a lot of respect for this person, so if you say so. But did you see eye to eye with her, I guess?
A lot of the unsafe adults in my life were before we got really close, so I didn't really have anyone there, but there were a couple. Yeah, like when I was a little older, actually, not when I was 15, more when I was like 17, like older high school years. I like to call them my good and bad years. I definitely did really well when I was pregnant and the year after that. And I had a lot of self-growth in those 2 years of my life. And then when I went back to school in person was when things for me started to go back downhill, because I had all this repressed memories and trauma from like friends. I literally cut off every single person I talked to for like 2 years. And I just wanted to focus on myself, get through the pregnancy, get through this. And I think when I went back and started to let in all these repression that I was having, I wasn't able to handle it. And I just let it all in too fast. I let in all these people in my life. And that, allowed people that weren't great to come into my life too. And I think it's good to acknowledge that. And some, were adults. And like my friends' parents and my friends were totally fine, but their parents weren't, which is crazy to think, like they just wanted to be fun or whatever. And I just didn't understand what she was trying to say at the time. I did listen because at that point, like I was starting to have more goals and I could see people a little bit easier, but people still treated me bad and emotionally abused me. And I was getting emotionally abused by adults in my life, which is really crazy to think about, and just them laying on all their 50 plus years of drama on me, like little 17-year-old me. And it brought up a lot of things. The family that I had lived with when I was in foster care, they were going through a huge family crisis. And it was my friend's family that I lived with from my school. And that was a whole other thing to get into. But she would lay on me every day about her family drama. And I couldn't tell her daughter, my friend. And I held that for years. Oh. And it wasn't until high school, after I had my kiddo, I had not seen her. And it really ruined, being in foster care ruined our friendship, which is sad to say, but it did. And I remember I saw her once and she asked me, she said, did you know that this was going on, when you lived with us? And I couldn't face her even to this day, I couldn't. And it's crazy. And because of this, holding on to someone else's past and this adult in my life, and I was at the time, 10? And that experience, now I acknowledge, went into how it was in high school with other adults emotionally abusing me. And I didn't even know what that was until recently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, an adult, nobody, but especially not an adult, shouldn't make you be the adult in their situation. So I'm sorry. That's terrible. I hope your friend can maybe through time be like, yeah, that was kind of uncool of my mom to do that. Dang.
Yeah, I hope so one day.
Did you want to say anything else before we close up? Or
people wonder why there's no change happening and why people are still not understanding like this basic level of consent, right? And this basic level of body freedom. It's so important if we do want to create different statistics for foster youth regarding consent. The society has to change. And I really hope that I can be a part of the change.
Thanks for stopping by. To hear more and support our cause, like this video and subscribe to our channel. And check out fosterreprohealth.org for more resources.